What's up, everybody? This is the Ikesinspirations podcast, and today I have a great guest on. I have a man named Elliot, Connie, and Elliot is a psychotherapist. He's an author, and he's a creator of the Family Therapy podcast, and I'm grateful to have him on. Before we get into it, Elliot, can you please introduce yourself to the audience and briefly explain who you are and your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, like you said, my name is Elliot Connie, and I'm an author, I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm a podcaster. I'm a lecturer, and I do lots of things. And my hope is to use psychotherapy to help people heal from wounds and to inspire people to be the best version of themselves. I think that's what my books are about, my platform about, my work is about, all of those things. And how I got here, man, I mean, that's a long story. I don't know if I can tell that quickly, but
briefly, yeah.
I just, I'm a person who had a difficult childhood. My father was a very angry, abusive guy, and I had to do something with that pain. And I started thinking about, if I can help people heal from their injuries and heal from their wounds and heal from their struggles, then maybe all the shit I went through wasn't purposeless, and it would give me a reason to keep going. And that's what led me to doing what I do.
Gotcha. I gotcha. So, you would say your childhood and how you grew up, is that how it got into psychotherapy? Like, what exactly inspired you to become a psychotherapist?
Yeah. My childhood got me into thinking about healing and psychology and human behavior and why we do the things that we do. I actually didn't expect to create a career in psychotherapy. What happened there was I was in college and I was really struggling, man. Like, I was at a time in my life, I was really, really going through it. I was in college. I just transferred to a new college, and I was living in a new city and having issues with that dad and self-esteem issues. And I was really struggling. And for whatever reason, one of my professors, I was walking out of class and she stopped me and she said, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I didn't know how to answer that question. I'd never really thought about it before. I don't know. And she said, "You should think about becoming a psychotherapist." And I didn't know what a psychotherapist was. I'd never even heard of such a thing. I asked her what it was. She said, like, a mental health counselor. She thought I'd be very good at it. And that was such a strange comment to me. I asked her why. Like, why do you think I'd be good at this? And she said, because people listen to you. And I was like, what? And she said, I watch a lot of students come in and out of these doors. She'd been a professor there for like 20, 25 years, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And she said, you're different. She said, there's something different about you, and I think you should think about it. And I did. I thought about it, and I went and changed my major to psychology.
Wow.
And, I think there are times in your life where, like, things are happening around you and you have no control over it. And that was a moment in my life where it put me on a path that led me to being where I am here today.
Yeah, man. And so that's awesome, man. I think psychotherapists, the job they do is incredibly interesting. If I knew what I knew now, looking back in college, I would probably choose the path of becoming a therapist because I enjoy listening to people, hearing their perspectives, and trying to offer some type of perspective that can help. And so I didn't do that. I became a pharmacist instead, which is okay. I'm happy. I'm grateful for that.
That's pharmacists too. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's amazing too. But I'm curious. What was for me? I went to school for 6 years, and college was, although I had a great time, it was a lot of work. I'm curious. What was the process of becoming a psychotherapist like for you?
Well, I told you, I really think there were like forces at play bigger than me that were helping this happen. When I graduated from college, my GPA was not terribly great. I had a bachelor's degree in psychology. My GPA wasn't terribly great. As proud as I am to have a degree at all, and as proud as I was at the time to have a degree at all, the first few years incoming, those undergraduate years were really, really difficult. I was going through some things with my father, and I had to set some boundaries with him, and it was not very easy to do, and really impacted my mental health. And it's hard to be a 4.0 student when you're mentally completely falling apart. So I was just happy to have a degree because then I could work. I could get a job. And then one day I graduated from this school, and the school I graduated from didn't have a master's program attached to it.
Yeah.
And one day that same professor called me and said, "We've created a master's degree in counseling, and I want you to apply."
Wow.
And I'd been out of school for about a year. I was working at a community mental health agency as a caseworker. Wow. And she said, "I want you to apply." And I was like, my GPA is not very high. I don't feel like getting rejected. And she said, "No, if you apply, we're going to make sure you get in." So I applied, and I got in, and I don't know, I was in the program probably about 2.5 years. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but about 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was hard work, but it was fulfilling, man. I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people experience things that are hard work, and it's hard work because you're not working on something that's meaningful to you.
Yeah.
It was hard work, meaning I had to put forth effort.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed it because it was meaningful to me. I felt like I was fulfilling a purpose. And I tell people a lot, I grew up as a man in graduate school. I went to graduate, even though they let me in, I was struggling with, I guess what I'll call imposter syndrome. And I felt like all the other kids in class were better off than me, and they were white and they were affluent and all these things. And I didn't feel like I belonged. And I remember we had a professor that was really hard, and a class that was really hard. And going up to the first test, man, it was tough. And I remember sitting for that test, and it was one of those tests where every question was a long essay you had to write. And it was back in those days where you have to hand write your essay answers. It was one of, at the end of the class, my hand hurt. And I remember coming a week later, and we got our grades, and out of 40 people, only 3 people passed. And I was not one of them. I was not one of them. I got a 68.
Wow.
This is funny. It's almost 20 years ago, and I still remember this. In fact, it was 20 years ago later this year. I still remember it. I got a 68. And I was bummed, man. And that 68 was confirmation I did not belong in graduate school. But as everybody else was reading their test results, I started hearing 54. This one woman got a 17. I started hearing numbers that were way lower than mine. So even though I hadn't succeeded, I had outperformed many of the people in the class. And that made me feel like, even though this exam was hard, so I got to step my game up in terms of where I landed with the people around me. I was on par with them, or even ahead of them, because most of them really, really failed this test. So for me, this was a massive win. I felt like I belonged, and I wanted to accept the challenge. A lot of these kids, I say kids just because it was 20 years ago, but a lot of these people, they dropped that class. And I remember saying, I'm not dropping this class. I'm either going to pass this class or fail out of grad school right here, right now. This is the last stand. I'm going to make this happen. And 2 years later, I made it. I had a master's degree.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Everything you're saying is I can relate to, because I went to college too, and I went to Northeastern University. Northeastern University is predominantly white, and I went to a pharmacy school, and in it, I think I was only 3 or 4 black kids out of 150, and after the first 2 years, the 2 black kids dropped out. So I'm starting to be yo, do I belong here too?
Right.
So I get that feeling of yo, is this meant for me? And I think it wasn't until my like third or fourth year in college, once I started like getting the same results or above average with other people, and people have that conversation like, yo, what did you get on that? Did you got A, B, and C, or like that? And I've kind of realized I got the correct answer and other people didn't. I'm like, oh, these Asian people look smart, but they're not as smart as they look. Or at least to me, that's how I felt at the time. Once I started to see, like, I saw a bunch of Asians like kind of confused. I don't know. I kind of, it made me feel like I wasn't that far off. So
yeah, I can compete. I can
compete. Yeah,
I compete. I didn't have the background they had. And by the way, I'm very familiar with the area Northeast, and I graduated from high school in a place called Franklin, Massachusetts.
I'm from Boston. Yeah.
I graduated right around there. But like, it just made me feel like even though I didn't have the resources that they had, and I didn't come from the backgrounds that they had, I could compete. Mm-hmm. And when you give someone like hope and even a little bit of belief, mm-hmm. it changes everything. So that 68 gave me a little bit of hope that I could compete, because everybody around me seemed to have done much worse.
Yeah. And it's kind of one of the reasons why I love podcasting. You know, you talk about finding something that is very fulfilling for you. I'm gonna be honest. My pharmacist job, although it allows me to do my passion and whatnot, I don't get fulfillment from it. But when I do this podcast, man, I love what I do, man. Like, I love this. I get to speak to Elliot, Connie. I get to speak to such incredible people. I'm so serious. And I get such incredible perspective from so many people that, like, I'm like, how do you want to talk to me if I'm not going to complain? And just like you say, like, it seems that God works in mysterious ways for you. Yeah. It's interesting how I feel like once I started this podcast, you know, I'll do one podcast and then someone will be like, oh, man, I had a great time. You should speak to X, Y, and Z. And then, it's just like people kind of start to come into my life as well that also agree to do my podcast. So I understand what you mean when you feel like things work mysteriously for you. So, you know, you're working as a psychotherapist. You said you've been a psychotherapist for like 20 years, at least 2 decades. And I'm just kind of curious, in your experience, what is the most common issue you have experienced or clients come to you as a psychotherapist? And what do you think is the cause of that issue?
Wow. That's a good question. I think the most common issue that people come to therapy with is anxiety and depression. I'll put those two together. And I think the cause of those issues, while very, very multifaceted, I think the biggest cause is people are not taught to love themselves enough. Kind of live life with a high level of self-doubt and low self-esteem. And when you live that way, you're inherently going to have anxiety and you're going to inherently depress. And I think that's a really difficult thing. Like, for example, if I convinced you that you are a great mountain climber.
Yes.
Like, if I just convince you of that, even if you've never climbed a mountain before, it's completely relevant. If I just complimented you and I praised you and I just, over the course of time, convince you you're a great mountain climber. And then one day I say, oh man, there's a big mountain over there. You got to go climb it. You would have such self-belief.
Yes.
Because you've been convinced you're a great mountain climber, you wouldn't see the mountain as an obstacle. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people, they're actually taught to focus more on their flaws and their deficits and what's wrong with them. So when they face an obstacle in life, they don't face it with a level of belief in themselves. They actually face it thinking the obstacle is more important than their resilience. And they live their life from that perspective, which causes anxieties and depressions. When actually the key to life is to realize you're a great mountain climber, so go climb that mountain.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize that. And I think what really good psychotherapy does is it helps people heal so they can see themselves through the lens of capability. And when people see themselves through that very particular and specific lens, they live their life as if they're capable. So when I see the next obstacle, I just assume I can climb it because I've been convinced that I now know how to climb mountains.
Yeah. And so it sounds to me that unfortunately, you're saying that people don't receive enough praise for being themselves, but they get a lot of critique, unfortunately, and that critique unfortunately, it seems like human nature, we focus on negativity more than positivity. Like if you're on social media and someone says, "Oh, you're a bitch" or whatever, everyone's going to look at it and focus on that, despite the hundreds of positive comments you receive. So yeah, I can definitely see that being a huge issue, Elliot. And it kind of reminds me of how like you felt inclined to be a psychotherapist because someone came to you and you were like and praised you and made you believe in something that you didn't even see in yourself.
That's right. I mean, like growing up in the 80s and 90s in Boston and then just outside of Boston, like the church I went to was in Dorchester.
Oh, that's great. Oh,
yeah, it was in Dorchester. It was called Refuge Church of Christ, if you know where that is.
No, I'm from Hyde Park. Well, yeah, in Hyde Park, yeah.
It's very close to there, right off Blue Hill Ave.
Oh, that's crazy, man.
And if when Elliot Connie was, a teenager, let's say 13 in the early 90s, if I had said to somebody in my community, in my environment, I want to get a master's degree and become a psychotherapist, they would have told me how hard it was, not how great I am.
Yeah.
So if I had said to people like, I want to get a master's degree one day and become a psychotherapist, and I want to write books, and I want to travel the world, and I want to make a difference, they would have said, man, you with your grades, and nobody from here does that. And they'd have said all of these things, but they wouldn't have said, man, I believe in you. I believe you can do that.
Yeah.
So many people, you just get those messages.
Yeah.
And what we don't realize is those messages program us on how we deal with life. Mm-hmm. So when you do have an obstacle, like you get fired from a job, instead of realizing, I'm a badass, I can handle this, we think, oh, this is devastating. I can't get through this. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know what you're going to do? You're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to pull your pants up and you're going to go out there and face this challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about ourselves that way. Mm-hmm. And the whole reason why is exactly that. I know for a fact, if I told people I grew up with, I'm going to be a world-renowned psychotherapist one day, they would have told me how crazy and ludicrous that dream was.
Yeah.
And that's why we have these issues. That's why we have these problems.
Yeah. And I've noticed that people who come with those type of critiques, they're often people who have never done what you're talking about. I've noticed that when I speak about my goals to people who are more successful than me, they are all for it. Like, I'll give you an example. Right now, one of my goals is I'm trying to buy an apartment complex. And if I tell that to people from my neighborhood where I grew up, people will either say that's good or like kind of say, oh, you're better than me or whatnot, like it doesn't come with much excitement or praise. Now, I have a mentor who literally buys apartment complexes for a living. He's like, oh, man, you can do it, man. Like, oh, man, it's so easy. It's actually not as hard as you think it is. And his belief in me is making me question, like, oh, I can really do this. You know what I'm saying? Because I have a mentor who's literally telling me that I can do it, and we meet every week. And so, it's simple stuff as that. But my question then, Elliot, is why do you feel like people are so inclined to follow negativity? Because in my opinion, I think, for whatever reason, when we see positive praises, it doesn't hit as much for a lot of people. Or like when someone compliments you, but for whatever reason, like we tend to push back on it or we don't receive it too greatly. But if someone says something negative, like we're really like frustrated, like, or like we take it more personally. Why do you feel like people do that?
Because we're stupid. Actually, like human beings, there's something about our brains, this is just true for humans, that when you hear negative feedback, you tend to perceive that as more honest, and the person who told you that as more honest. When you hear positive feedback, we tend to believe that the person who told us that was lying, and that the compliment was less honest. And that's just a human nature trait. That's just like what we do. if someone says, Elliot, you look fat in that t-shirt, you have a tendency to believe, that person was the one willing to tell me the truth. Or if someone comes and says, man, you look great in that t-shirt, we think you're just saying that to be nice. But the truth is, like, I love that you have this big goal, and I love even more that you've surrounded yourself by at least there's one person who believes that you can do it, because their belief in you will impact your belief in you.
Yes.
The environment we surround ourselves in impacts who we are. I've gotten to the point where I don't tell my goals to small-minded people because I don't want to hear what they have to say. We tend to give people feedback based upon our limitations, not theirs. So if somebody if I tell somebody I want to buy an apartment complex and they say, oh, that sounds ridiculous, my brain's like, to you, it sounds ridiculous. That's a you issue. That doesn't mean it's ridiculous for me. Like that's a reasonable goal to me. So you're trying to give me your limitation, and I've had to train my brain to not let people give me their limitations. I'm not hearing their feedback.
And I completely agree. I think what it is I just think a lot of us were full of insecurities, and I think we simply just project our insecurities onto others, unfortunately. And I think social media is a huge testimony and shows that. I kind of wanted to talk about that in the nature of social media. And why do you feel like, have you noticed throughout your experience as a psychotherapist, like, what do you feel like the relationship with social media and mental health has been like as in your work,
I think it's been terrible. A couple of things. Number one, human beings are not designed to have this level of stimulation. So what social media does is it gives us 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's never off. So it gives us constant stimulation. There's always a news story. There's always an alert going on. There's always something happening. And we're not designed for that level of stimulation. The other thing is we have a tendency to compare ourselves to what we're seeing. Whether it's real or not, doesn't matter. We have a tendency to compare ourselves to what we're seeing and not even understanding that usually what we're seeing is somebody else's best presentation. Like, I remember I'm in the airport recently, and I saw this girl take, I don't even know, 500 selfies, like from different angles, just taking all these things. And then I'm sure she posted on Instagram once. Now, the person watching that, looking at her Instagram feed, they don't know that she took 500 pictures until it had the perfect lighting and the perfect angle and the perfect this and the perfect that. So the average girl looks at that and thinks, oh, I'm not as beautiful as that. Well, of course you're not. No one's as beautiful as, like, using these filters and taking the right angles and lighting and all. Like, we're just not designed for this. But yet, it's here and here to stay. And I use social media. I'm not here to bash it or anything like that. It's just, is it having a positive impact on our mental health? Absolutely not.
And as you were speaking, I was also reminded, like, you're talking about people do like 500 selfies, women do 500 selfies to get that one beautiful picture. It also kind of reminds me of like YouTube videos and YouTube content creators. Sometimes, as a content creator, it takes a lot of takes to get that perfect video. I know you have a YouTube channel as well. And sometimes it creates a perception that, man, this guy is so perfect. Like, he can just speak and like say all these crazy things and speak so articulate, but yet it took him but you don't know behind the scenes, he had to probably cut the camera a couple of times to get that real cut.
Not only that, I might have hired someone to write the script for him. I might have been up all night rereading the script over and over. I might have hired a studio so it has the perfect lighting and the perfect angles. I might have hired a cameraman to shoot it. I might have hired a sound engineer to record it. Like, there's so much that goes into this stuff, but we have a tendency to compare our worst day to other people's best presentation. And that's just not good for our mental health.
I mean, I'm with you. I do think social media has its positives, but I'm if you tends to have a lot more negatives, in my opinion, than positives. One of the things that I also really dislike about social media is like you said, it's not natural for our brains. And I always hear this. Like, you can go on Facebook, and one thing you see your friend from college graduating, then the next thing you see, yo, rest in peace, my nigga. Like, this guy just died. Like, and you just go from like a really positive thing to like a negative thing, and you're only swiping through. So what might be a big moment in your life is it's a swipe in your life, and like it's like so emotionally like unintelligent. Like, you just kind of like give that level of, and you swipe, congratulate, and like you don't give it the same energy that it deserves in real life, and that always threw me off, like the constant switching between like violence and then something positive, and it's just too much.
I mean, look, I'll give you a really, to make your point, I'll give you a really great example. When I was in full-time private practice, which I'm not anymore, I still see clients, but I'm not in full-time private practice now. And I had an office before COVID, just like everybody. I had a therapy office, and what I used to do, I was seeing clients like all day, every day. And what I used to do was between sessions, I would go to Facebook just to like separate my brain from the heavy content that was happening in session. So I'd go to Facebook, and in the beginning, Facebook was nothing more than cat memes and cool posts from somebody you went to high school with or whatever. One day, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I'll never forget it. Like, and I'm someone, I don't go seek tragic news because I know the impact that it can have on my mental health. So I don't go seek it. So one day I'm scrolling on Facebook, and I see a black man standing like this, and I see a white police officer standing in front of him with his gun drawn. With a situation in South Carolina. And then the black man turns and runs, and the police officer shot him 6 times to his death. And I thought to myself, I don't want to see this. I was just scrolling on social media. I wasn't looking for a murder.
Yeah.
And that has happened several times in my life now. But I remember that being the first. Like, I'm on social media looking at cat memes and funny videos, and I saw a murder happen.
And I have another story to kind of even like promote your point. So I'm on Instagram and YouTube. I would say YouTube is like my main thing. Technically, you can say it's a social media or not. I don't use Twitter that much. The only reason I recently created a Twitter account was an attempt to promote this podcast, right? So I signed up for a Twitter account. I didn't like anything. I don't have any friends or followers. I kid you not, the first thing I see on my feed is like anti like racism people. So I keep seeing a bunch of black people beating up white cops. And I don't know, I think it's due to like the political nature of Twitter or whatever. I'm like, why is this I go on social media. I kid you not. That's the first thing I see. I didn't even like anything. I didn't even like it was just the first thing I said. I'm like, why is this showing up on my feed, dude? Like, I was like, I'm just trying to promote my content, So I understand.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in now. And I remember being, I'm in my 40s, so I remember what the world was like pre-social media.
Yeah.
And I remember being in high school, and I had my like social studies teacher is what we call it. And he was like, one day in the 1960s, we all watched a man shot on live television. And that was Lee Harvey Oswald while they were escorting him into the jail in Dallas after arresting him for allegedly shooting President Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, what was that like? I mean, you saw a guy shot. Now, fast forward, it's 2024. The average person has seen hundreds of murders.
Yeah.
Like, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember like when the Ahmaud Arbery murder happened.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see that shit. Like, I worked very hard not to see that. And I was watching the trial because I was very interested on were these men going to be held accountable.
Yeah.
I was watching the trial and they showed the video in the trial, and I'll never forget. He's wrestling with that guy over the gun. And then you could hear the gun go off, and you see pink mist.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah, you see pink mist kind of float around his body. Gun goes off again, and he turns and tries to run away from that man, and then collapsed on the ground and laid on the ground until he died. And I like, it's now commonplace.
Yeah.
I mean, the average person has seen hundreds of murders on YouTube or whatever. I saw that video on YouTube, and we're not designed for that. That 100% has an impact on my level of mental health and anxiety. As a Black man, I try to jog every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in Colorado here for some meetings. And at the end of each night, I go on the street and I jog.
Mm-hmm.
Every night when I'm on the road jogging, I think, is this a safe area for me to jog?
Mm-hmm.
Every night I think, if I encounter a police officer and I'm running in a black hoodie, and how am I going to be perceived?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter. It could be a white hoodie, it could be anything. Like, if this neighborhood sees me, an African-American man, running through their neighborhood, I have to ask myself, how am I going to be perceived? And there's absolutely a bit of anxiety attached to that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely a bit of anxiety. So, yeah, the world we live in with the 24/7 news cycle and the way social media is, like, it is very, very hard not to be scared, anxious, angry, all those things. And that's not good for us.
Yeah, and I can go on a social media rant and talk. I could talk hours about this. But before I switch the topic, I do want to also acknowledge that I think the point you made about the desensitization of violence is also abnormal. Now that, like you said, back in the day, if someone got shot, like, you can, like, think and ponder about it for a week or so or whatever, because it's a big deal. Now it's just like, what, like, it's just another day, another dollar, like, which I think is terrible. And just to prove another thing that it desensitizes to you, if you go on the Instagram For You page, you see the hottest, like, chicks ever, and you're just like, wow, she's bad, he's bad, oh, he's bad, and you just want to focus on the hottest chicks compared to now the chicks that you see in real life. They're probably like 6s or 6.5s, and you'll probably get desensitized to the beauty in them because of all the hot chicks you're seeing on Instagram.
That's absolutely true. Like, and all of that is not real. It's all filters and fakeness and plastic surgery even. Like, it's just not real.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like, we have this skewed idea of beauty that does not match what happens in reality because of what we see on social media. So I might see, some of the baddest women in the world on social media, but if I go out to a bar tonight, I'm not going to see anything close to comparable to what I saw there. Like, it's not real. But we don't know that it's not real. It's a very odd thing.
Yeah. So, Elliot, I know you advocate strongly for the Black community and mental health, and I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on what do you think the Black community gets wrong about mental health. The reason why I asked this question is I feel like mental health, although it's becoming more like of a trendy topic and people are I believe are being more accepting of it, I still believe there's taboo in it and people don't want to talk about it enough.
Right.
And so what do you think is the cause of that, and what do you feel like Black people may get wrong about mental health?
I think the number one thing Black people get wrong about mental health treatment is thinking that it's not for us. It's not for them. Because it is. I think Black people should engage in the healing journey more. I think everybody should engage in the healing journey more, to be honest, but Black people in particularly are a wildly underserved community, mostly because most clinicians don't look like them. So the number one thing I think that they get wrong is that this is not a service for them. And I'm really pleased that I do think that is shifting, and I'm very proud of the role that I've played in that shift. Like, my podcast is really popular, and my books have gone, and also, representation matters, and being one of the most visible African-American psychotherapists is inspiring a generation of other people to A, get more help, and B, also become a psychotherapist. So the number one thing that I think people get wrong is that we just think this service is not for us, when it is. Absolutely is.
Yeah, and I want to applaud you for the work you're doing. I think it's absolutely essential, and you're definitely part of the reason why it's becoming more popular. I was introduced to you through the Breakfast Club, and I saw you speaking with Charlamagne the God, and Charlamagne has also been a huge proponent of mental health awareness. So I think people like you are necessary. I really do, and I'm glad that you introduced that. So I'm also kind of curious, as a therapist, because I'm not one myself. Well, technically I can say I'm a therapist for my friends when they have issues and I let them vent, but I'm not a professional therapist. And I would like to just kind of learn, when you're in therapy and you're helping different people, what kind of therapy strategies are you employing, and what's effective and what's not effective? And
I think the number one therapy strategy to employ is connection. Human beings heal through connection. So I'm sure, sometimes people think that I'm going to say some sort of strategy this technique or that technique or whatever. But the number one strategy is for my clients to know I genuinely and truly care about them. When you're in an environment, and I'm sure you find this to be true also as a pharmacist. If
for sure.
I believe you genuinely and truly and believe in me and care about me, I'm significantly more likely to take your medicinal advice.
Yes.
The same thing is true for my clients. If they believe I genuinely and truly care about them, they're significantly more likely to take action based on our conversation. So the number one strategy is to demonstrate to my clients that I genuinely and truly care about them. And in that care, try to make hope a bigger role in their lives.
I absolutely love that, man. I'm gonna be honest, man. I love the idea of therapy. I'm a big fan of it. I do it a lot. Whether it's through music, listening to music, or introspecting or journaling. But I've also been to a fair share of therapists, and I did not get the feeling that they cared about me. The relationships often felt very transactional in nature. And I know it's kind of weird. It's a profession. Therapy is a profession. But knowing that your conversation is going to end in 45 minutes or an hour, I don't know, there's something about it that kind of makes it feel very transactional, or at least the way it gets disrupted. Do you want to speak towards that and how some problems you may have heard from clients about therapy and what their experience were like?
Yeah, I think very often clients would say their therapist doesn't feel like they're connected, or it does feel transactional. I think that's a very common complaint. But it's the therapist's job to overcome that. Just because there's a time limit doesn't mean we can't have a real connection. So the therapist's job is to overcome all of those variables and overcome all of those barriers, and allow the client to feel heard and valued and important and connected and all of that stuff. I just don't think therapists do a great job of that.
And do you think it's because of the professional and business nature of the role that is a difficult thing? What do you think about therapists being friends with their clients? Because the reason I'm curious is you're talking about connection. And I'm imagining in order to have a strong connection with your client, you probably have to be a friend to them. Or am I wrong? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I suppose I would label it a friendship with boundaries,
Yeah.
But your client just simply has to know that you believe in them and you care. And I think there is a friendship quality to that. You wouldn't hang out with a friend who didn't believe that you cared about, and vice versa. I just think a lot of therapists were taught overly focused on techniques. We're taught overly focused on those things. But I can tell you the number one thing that's important is connection.
No, I believe that for sure because I feel like oftentimes you can get advice from one person, but you don't feel as connected or are related to them. But then you can get someone who's just like you and be like, and kind of get a different response. So, I'm kind of curious. I feel like as a black man, talking about therapy can be hard, or opening up is very vulnerable. And I read studies that women are a lot more receptive to therapy and get a lot more success out of it than men, which to me honestly makes a lot of sense. And one of the problems that I come across with therapy that I would like for you to speak about is sometimes, with men, we want solutions. We want like what's gonna help us get out of our problem, whereas I feel like women like to talk about their problems, so therapy feels like it makes more sense for them. Like, how my question to you is then, how do you make men feel more comfortable with expressing their feelings and being vulnerable?
Wow, that's a good question, and I'll do my best to answer it. I think what I want to do is, I would say two things. In the clinical room, I want to make sure that I'm doing a very good job of being a non-judgmental person that a client can express themselves to. The other part of that, like how do I help men be receptive to therapy? You mentioned Charlamagne the God earlier. I actually think Charlamagne the God is the single most important person in the world of Black mental health. He's been so transparent with his healing journey. And I think he inspires other men to take their healing journey very seriously too. So I think the two ways that we address that is, me as a clinician, I want to make sure that I'm a person that people feel comfortable with talking about their journey in an open and transparent way. But I think the other way we do it is on a larger scale, systemic level. And I think in areas like that, I think Charlamagne the God is literally the most important person in this whole thing, because he can show people what it's like to be open and transparent and honest and those things. And I think that matters.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like, I'm just curious, when you're in therapy, do you ever feel like, oh man, this guy's not opening up or he's lying? Because I've heard many stories from people who are traumatized and depressed go to therapy, but they talk about how difficult it is to actually be vulnerable, and they tend to resist talking about the problem that got them there, even though that's kind of what they need to talk about. It's actually funny. I was listening to a Charlamagne podcast. I think it was with Jay Shetty, and he was actually saying that he lied like in half of his therapy sessions, like in the beginning. Do you feel like people lie to you or not?
I'm sure they do. But if I feel like someone is not being open and or lying, that's actually a bigger indictment on me than it is of them, because the only reason they would lie to me is because they don't trust me. And it's my job to earn people's trust. It's my job to have a conversation with them that's meaningful enough and connected enough that they don't have to lie. So if someone is lying, I feel like I'm the one who needs to do some work, not them.
I like it. I like that. Yeah. And that's kind of you kind of also placing your boundaries and not letting them affect you. Yeah. So one of the things I'm also curious about for therapists is, because you're a human being at the end of the day, and you get bombarded with, I'm sure, all types of emotional trauma and people revealing to you. And I'm sure that can kind of be taxing at times. I'm kind of curious, who is the therapist for the therapist? Because one of the reasons I asked this, honestly, is I went to a therapy session one time, and I felt like, because I like to ask questions, it became a therapy session for him. And I'm like, bro, are we here for you or are we here for me, bro? I'm just like, I don't know, man. And that kind of turned me off. But it has me thinking, who's the therapist for the therapist? Or do you not have one, or do you feel it?
No, I don't have a therapist currently, and I'm very okay with that. Yeah, I think number one, you need to be doing work that is fulfilling to you. I think number two, you need to be doing that work in a way that is fulfilling to you. And number three, if you like the way that I do therapy, I don't really take on my clients' trauma. I take on their hopes and their resiliencies. So doing therapy is actually good for me. And if it weren't, I would have no problem, going out and going to find a therapist.
Gotcha. I hear you. I'm curious. I've heard from some people and some therapists that like you part of their training is like they have to go to a therapist to understand what it's like to be a therapist. Is have you heard about that, or like is that true, or like
it's program dependent. So some programs where people go to school require that and some don't. It's not every therapist, no.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was just I don't know, that was curious to me. But okay, yeah. So I also want to talk to you about the books you wrote, and also what's the process of writing a book like Elliot? Because one of my goals is I want to write an autobiography of my life, and I hope to write at least one book. I can see myself maybe writing 2 or 3. But I'm curious, as someone who's been an accomplished author, what has the process of writing taught you about yourself? And can you just kind of talk overall about the process of writing a book and what it's like for you?
Yeah, the process of writing a book has been very, very healing to me because you get to tell your story. I would say, like, I love the idea of you writing an autobiography. Like, tell your story. And in your books, you get to tell your story from your perspective.
Yeah.
And that's healing. Like helping your voice to matter is a very, very healing thing. And that's what book writing is. Like, I get to talk about the incidents of my life. I get to talk about my ideas as a clinician. I get to talk about all those things through my voice, and it's healing in that way. So I love it.
Yeah. And what would you say writing a book has taught you about yourself? Because I feel like writing a book is a very introspective journey. Like, you're constantly just thinking about what you did, what you don't do. Why should I say this? Should I say this about myself? Is this true? You know what I'm saying? I would imagine. Like, what have you learned about yourself from writing books?
It's a good question too. I don't really know how to answer that. I think one of the things I've learned is, but this is a lesson I've already known, but I can do really hard things. So there's something. I have a book coming out in August.
Sure. What's the name of it? You can reveal it.
No. I can. Gosh, I wasn't expecting to talk about it, so I'll tell you the title in a minute.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the title in a minute. But I have a book coming out in August, and every time I like get to the final draft of the book and send it to the publisher, I feel this like massive sense of accomplishment. Like this real massive sense of accomplishment. And so what I learned about myself is like, I'm capable of doing really hard things. And it feels really wonderful. It helps rebuild you as a person and all of the things you've been through or might have struggled with. And again, like, if you want to improve your mental health, like one of the things that causes us so many like mental health disruptions is when someone removes our voice or our ability to be our authentic selves. So, writing a book, like, you get to just be you and tell your story and tell it in a way that is really congruent to who you are and who you want to be. And I think that's a powerful thing for all of us. And I think it's why writing a book has been very good. We're writing books, plural. Like I said, my next book, it's my 6th. It's called Change Your Questions, Change Your Future.
Okay. I love that. Change your questions, change your future.
Questions, change your future.
Okay, I love that. Yeah.
And when I get to the end, I'm always like, I did that. Like, I really did that. And anybody who has the desire to write a book, I hope they do, because there's a healing component to using your voice to share your message.
Yeah. I love the title of your book, man. I've been doing this podcast and I'm like 22, 23 episodes in, and I hope to do this for the rest of my life because I love it. And I was I guess I think God has blessed me with the ability to ask great questions. And one of my guests told me that, and he said that like the quality of your life, it depends on the quality of the questions you ask. And that really hit me. I'm like, what are the questions that we're not asking ourselves that we need to hear in order to progress as a human being? And it sounds like that's what your book is about.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people, we ask ourselves questions trying to figure out problems instead of questions trying to figure out purpose. Mm-hmm. So when something really difficult happens, why not ask, what about this situation is making me better or stronger? Or how do I know I can get through this hard thing? Like, imagine if you got fired from your job tomorrow, and the first question you ask yourself is, how do I know I can handle this difficult thing? You're going to learn things about yourself. Because here's the thing, and I wish everybody would understand this. Life is hard. There's nothing anyone can do to make life anything other than hard. Mm-hmm. So the goal isn't to try to build a life without pain. Mm-hmm. Life will bring about pain. Mm-hmm. The goal is to how to build a life where I become the person I want to become and do the things I want to do in spite of life's challenges. So that means when a challenge happens, like it's supposed to happen, that's life. So my job is to figure out, how do I handle this in a way to keep moving forward? Which is a very different question, because other people say, why did this have to happen to me? And, and all that kind of, but that's the reason it happened is because that's what life does. You're going to get that flat tire. Your car is going to be stolen. You're going to get fired from that job. Your romantic partner will break up with you. The person you have a crush on won't respond to you. Like, that's life. You're going to get rejected from opportunities. You're going to apply for a job and not get it. You're going to get, beat up at times. Like, that's life. Mm-hmm. So when those things happen, I don't question like whether it's supposed to happen or not. Of course it's supposed to happen, because that's life. But I now change how I talk to myself, and I ask myself things like, how do I know I can get through this? Well, I've been through hard things before. Great. So now that just keeps us moving in the proper direction.
Yeah. And I would imagine you being a therapist yourself, like that's an integral role of what you do. You're probably sure you ask 1,000 questions to your clients, and I don't imagine the right type of questions can cause the right type of breakthrough and progress.
Yeah, the type of therapy that I do is based on questions. So I'm constantly asking questions throughout the session.
Yeah. I would imagine that. So, you got your book come out, which is great, and it sounds like a great book. I'm probably gonna have to. Is it on Amazon?
Yeah,
is it? I pre-order it. Now. Okay, yes, sir. I'm gonna have to pre-order. I love reading books, so I'm gonna pre-order that. Change your questions, change your future. And I literally before every podcast, I write at least 10 questions, man, and I'm just so intentional about the type of questions I ask the people I have, because I think it can drastically change the course of the conversation and how effective it is, and building connections. Yeah. So, also, Elliot, I'm curious to just learn, what is your favorite book and why? I'm sure as an author, you probably read a lot of books yourself.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite book?
Gosh. So I'll give you the book I'm reading right now, which is Charlamagne the God's book. Get Honest or Die Lying. His current book. I would say that is my favorite book right now, because I'm into it right now.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, all right. That's interesting. Now, I haven't read that book. I've read his book, Black Privilege. Loved that book. That was an incredibly great book. And it's also very inspiring to see him be an author, because like when you think of an author, sometimes you think of like a teacher or like a really like, I don't know. You don't really think of Charlamagne, but when you see someone like Charlamagne writing a book, it's like, man, like, okay, I can do this shit too. Like, that's what
I really believe Charlamagne is one of the most important people, because his profile is so public. The way he lives his life is so transparent, and some of the things he does, you wouldn't expect he would do them, like write the book.
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned about from Charlamagne is just the power of just speaking your truth, man. Like, instead of like having to lie or try to manipulate others, like I'm so transparent about just speaking truth to people, whether or not they may not like it. But if I'm going to say something that's hard or have a hard conversation, I try to be aware of my tone and try to frame it, the truth in a way that doesn't may offend them or take it negative. But I'm a big proponent of telling the truth.
No, Charlamagne lives in his truth, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I hope he continues the great work he does. So I'm also curious to just learn. You were talking about Charlamagne. You were on the Breakfast Club, which is really cool. You know, that it's a great platform, very well established. You know, everyone knows what that is. What was your experience like in the Breakfast Club? Was it great? Was it overrated, or was it like, what was that like?
It's amazing. You know, I've now done an interview of the Breakfast Club twice.
Oh, cool.
And to get to talk to Charlamagne and Envy. The first time I went, Jason Lee was a guest host. And, I mean, it's amazing. I have a lot of respect for Charlamagne. I have a lot of respect for DJ Envy. I have a lot of respect for Jess Hilarious. So to be on that platform and sharing a message about mental health with a largely Black community is powerful, is really meaningful to me.
Yeah, and I'm also glad that Charlamagne and the platform has been more conscious of getting mental health advocates and people who are actually going to benefit the community, like real estate investors and whatnot, and not just always going for entertainment, even though I know that gets the views, but I like the balance. I hope they continue to do that.
Yeah, Charlamagne is very intentional about that. That's on purpose, and I love it.
Yeah, and I've noticed that. And it seems like he's rebranding himself in a great, powerful way. And it's nice to see the evolution of him. I'm also kind of curious to just learn about, you know, so you've been a psychotherapist for 20 years, and you're an author and you're a podcaster, and you know you do a lot of great work. What is the ultimate goal of everything you're doing? Is there a goal in mind, or you know, and so
yeah, I want to change the world. I want to make the world a world where we can focus on hope, love, resilience, warmth. I think the world is too cold and too negative and too harsh. So the work that I put out into the world, I hope will create healing so that we can be our truest selves. I don't think we're designed to hate. I think we're designed to love. But we start being impacted by trauma, fear, and anxiety, and it makes us hate. So I hope my work will transform that and make everything different.
Yeah, that's a beautiful goal. So you just want to spread more love and promote positive work and faith. Yeah, I love it, man. And honestly, I'm on the same path. You know, maybe through different avenues, but I try to use this podcast to inspire more people to have different perspectives and look at life differently, and speak positively into them, and also ask questions that they probably never been asked through other guests, and make them think about, hey, like, is this what, you know, just thought-provoking things that make them think differently and bigger about life. So Elliot, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation and just learning about your work as a psychotherapist. If people want to learn, like, reach out to you or like just learn about your platform, how can people do that?
Man, there's several ways. First of all, you can find me on social media at Elliot Speaks. Make sure you spell my name right with 2 L's and 2 T's. At Elliot Speaks on Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads. That's how you can find me. You can also send me a text message. You can join my text community. Just send me a text message to 972-426-2640. It literally comes from my phone. It's me texting. But I'd love to be connected in my community and just talk to and inspire people.
Oh, wow. You're really like that accessible. Like, yeah, sharing your phone number on public. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I like it, but man, but that's cool, man. But Elliot, it was a blessing having you on.
Thanks, brother.
I'm glad I got to speak to you, and I wish you best of luck with all your endeavors, man.
Same to you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.